Order of Operations, Part 1. Lesson objectives: compute the square and square roots, compute computations, and evaluate expressions using the order of operations. Let's begin with squares and square roots. The square of a number means to multiply the number by itself. In exponent form, it will have an exponent of 2. For example, the square of 6 is 6 squared, or 6 to the second power, which is the same thing as saying 6 times 6, and 6 times 6 is 36. So 6 squared is 36. The inverse of squaring a number is finding the square root. Since 6 squared equals 36, the square root of 36 is 6. And this is how we write it in symbols. So the square root of 36 is 6. And this symbol means, what number do I square to get 36? Well, that would be 6 squared. The square and the square root cancel each other out. So if you take the square root of 6 squared, you get 6. So why are squares and square roots important in statistics? Well, many statistical concepts and formulas like standard deviation and what's called the standard error use square or square roots, sometimes both. The reason why squaring is important in statistics is because squaring will always give you a positive value. Why? If you take a negative number and you square it, you will always get a positive number. A negative times a negative is positive. A positive times a positive is always positive. So when you sum up these squared numbers, it will never be 0 unless all the numbers are exactly the same. Also, squaring emphasizes larger differences, a feature that turns out to be good and sometimes bad. And we'll talk more about this when we study what's called outliers, when describing the spread of a data set. So this idea of squaring, it will help us better describe what's called the spread of a data set. Squaring does have a problem. The units after squaring are changed. The units are squared, which are different than the original data units. So if we are measuring something in feet and we square it, the units are no longer feet, but they are feet squared. Since the square root is the inverse of squaring, if we have a data set and we square all the values, we can always take the square root and that will return us to the original units for the data. So how do we compute squares and square roots? So I'm going to show you how to do this using a calculator. I'm going to show two different types of calculators. The basic calculator that is on a computer or a handheld calculator, and I will also show you using a scientific or graphing calculator. Sometimes they can be a little bit different, so depending upon the calculator, how you input squares or square roots might be a little bit different for your personal calculator. So please work with your calculator as you watch this video. So here we have the standard calculator from the computer, and here we have this is called a TI-84 graphing calculator. Now you're not required to have one of these for this course, but you may have access to one, so I'll show you how to do both. So we wanted to compute 5 squared. Well, we can simply take 5 and then hit multiply by 5 and hit equal, and we get 25. Using this basic calculator, we can also hit 5 and then hit the x squared button, which will take 5 and square it, and we again get 25. Using a graphing calculator or some scientific calculators, again we can take 5 times 5, hit the enter button, and that's 25. We can also take 5 and hit the x squared button, 5 to the second power, hit enter, and again we get 25. Now let's do the next one. We want the square of negative 10. Using a basic calculator, we type in the number 10, we make it negative, and then we square the number, and we get 100. Negative 10 times negative 10 is 100. We have to be careful on some scientific and graphing calculators. if we just hit negative and hit 10, and then we hit the square button, we're going to end up with a negative number. Why is that? Well, the calculator is not squaring the negative number. So in that case, we need parentheses. So if we hit parentheses and then hit negative 10, and then we square it, we're telling the calculator to take negative 10 times negative 10. Negative times negative is always positive. Okay, so whenever we're squaring any number, it will always be positive. Next, we want to compute the square root of 49. Using a standard calculator, we type in the number first, 49, and then we hit the square root key. And this is saying the square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 49 is 7. On some scientific calculators, we hit the symbol first. So for this calculator, the 84, we want to hit second and x squared. Notice we get the radical symbol, the square root symbol. Then we type in the number 49, and then we hit enter, and we get 7. So it turns out that 49 is a perfect square. If we take the square root of a perfect square, we get a whole number, 7 in this case. Our next example is not a perfect square, 30. So again, with this standard calculator, we hit the number first, 30, then we hit the square root symbol. So the square root of 30 is about 5.48. We can always double check that by taking the number 5.48 times 5.48 should be around close to 30. Yes, and it is. So this is how we can double check our answer using whatever calculator that you have. Now, with the scientific calculator, we hit the symbol first, the square root symbol, so that's second, and then x squared, which gives me the square root symbol. Then we type in the number 30. Then we hit equals. And again, we get the same number. So you have to get comfortable with the calculator that you have. So here's a list of some perfect squares and square roots. So this will give you a little bit of practice of using your calculator on how you square numbers and how you take the square roots. Just keep in mind, if you are picking numbers that are not perfect squares, for example 30, you are not going to get a whole number answer when you take the square root. Lesson objective. So why do we need to use the order of operation in statistics? Order of operation is used to compute the mean, the standard deviation, the z-scores, the boundaries for outliers, the standard error, and also the margin of error. Now, StatCrunch will compute most of these, but like the z-score and the standard error, you will need to compute those on a calculator. So what is the order of operations? So the basic operations is multiply, divide, add, and subtract. Squaring and square roots are also mathematical operations. So there is a certain order to do these operations. Number one, you want to first perform any parentheses or grouping symbols. And you always start with the innermost group and work your way out. Next, you want to perform any exponents. Number three, you want to perform multiplication or division, going from left to right. So if division is more to the left than multiplication, you do division first. And finally, addition and or subtraction, going from left to right, just like you're reading a sentence. You start from the left and go to the right. There is a little saying to help you remember this certain order. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses is first, that's please. Exponents comes next, that's excuse. Multiplication or division from left to right, that's my dear. And then finally, addition or subtraction from left to right, and that's Aunt Sally. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Let's do some examples. Simplify 20 plus 3 times 4. So in this example, we have two operations, addition and multiplication. So we do multiplication before we do addition. So we need to multiply these two first. So 3 times 4 is 12. Then we bring everything else down. So we have a 20. We bring down the plus sign. So this is equal to 20 plus 12. And then if we add 20 plus 12, we get 32. So the answer is 32. Next, what is y when x is equal to a negative 2? So we want to find the value of y, and y is equal to 10 minus 4 times x. In this case, x is a negative 2. So again, we have subtraction, we have multiplication. We want to multiply before we subtract. So 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. Then we bring everything else down. So that's a y, and then we have a 10, and then we are subtracting. Subtracting a negative number means we add. So this is the same thing as saying 10 plus 8, which is, of course, 18. So when x is negative 2, y is 18. For this one, we want to compute what is 41 divided by the square root of 12. The square root of 12 is not a perfect square, so it's going to be a decimal number. So we will compute this on a calculator. So we want to compute 41 divided by the square root of 12. If you're using a standard calculator, a basic calculator like this one, you type in 41, then you hit divide, then you hit the number under the square root sign, which is 12, and then you click the square root button. So this number 3.46410 and on is the square root of 12. So now this is 41 divided by 3.4641, so on and so on. So you hit enter to complete it, and we see here in the output 41 divided by square root of 12 is about 11.8. If you have a scientific or graphing calculator, you type in the numerator, the top number, hit divide, and then you need to hit the square root icon next, so that's second and x squared for this calculator, and then you type in 12. Hit enter, and again we get 11.8. So the answer to this problem is rounded off, and that's what these symbols mean, approximately 11.8. Thanks for watching.